people know is that this hexagram has been known about by ancient people for as long as history has been recorded. People who did not have telescopes or the technology to view anything outside of the Earth's atmosphere besides the stars. That is quite the paradox. That's what's been on my mind lately about this subject. It is, number one, absolutely impossible for these people to have viewed Saturn, especially North Pole. Saturn being associated with the black cube, which has direct connection to the hexagon shape, which is a 2D format of the cube, proves to us without a doubt that these people over the centuries from all over the world understood that there was this anomaly at the peak of Saturn. This has led Saturn to be a leading role in astrology and mythology throughout the ages, and even to this day is part of our pop culture. So when you go down the rabbit hole of the Saturn mythology, you get into this Gnosticism, where Saturn is considered a great teacher, but through suffering specifically. It's been associated with the bringer of light, Lucifer, the primordial star, or the original black star is what it was called. It's also been called the black cube. Of course, the cube representing that 2D format of it, the hexagon at the top. And the name Saturn actually derives from Satan, which paints an ugly picture. But if you think about Satan as being a title, the accuser, things start to add up as to Saturn's role in relation to Jupiter, which is its opposite. The people who understood that there was a hexagon at the North Pole of Saturn must have been either incredibly sophisticated technologically, which we're told is not so, or were able to somehow, with some extrasensory perception, understand the makeup of Saturn. So if Saturn is here to teach us through suffering, I suppose it's not necessarily an evil force, but there is a price to be paid. The mythology that ties to Gnosticism seems to point in the direction of a sort of demiurge, or in Latin, the demiurgos, which is basically a deity decided to create a universe of its own, therefore creating a flawed reality. Like if you were to create a video game and you get one of the zeros or ones wrong within the coding, the entire game will be flawed. This is what seems to be, in a way, responsible for our messy physical reality. If this is so, is this something that is objectively real outside of us, or is it something that we project, or could it be a combination of both? Could it be that our reality is indeed a form of a syntax error that is somehow projected by Saturn as a being itself? And if so, does that mean that despite living within this flawed reality, we are still endowed with the divine spark? We seem to have God consciousness within animal bodies. So there seems to be a rift between the animal body and the God consciousness. Going back to the video game metaphor, even though the video game would be flawed, there is still the spark of the original author's purpose within the characters of the game, limited to the five senses, the five physical senses that we perceive reality through, of which we know is very thin compared to the actual spectrum of reality. Could it be that what the Bible described as original sin, synonymous with this idea of living within a flawed reality? But how does that make us living in a form of a school? And if we are indeed part of this flawed reality, that means that anything that is not in alignment with divine source should be wiped clean and start over, maybe from scratch. But however, this hasn't happened as we still live in this reality. How can it be so that if we live in a flawed, messy physical reality that doesn't actually represent true existence, how is it that we have been saved from being wiped clean from this hard drive? And that is where Christ seems to step into the picture. Now, this is quite a bit to unbox, and I realize that, but the evidence is absolutely staggering, whether it be mythological, scientific, or numerical. When you connect the dots, it seems as if there is something very strange and very otherworldly and divine happening. Does that beg the question, now that we have been saved, are we now responsible for transforming our reality into heaven, paradise. What can mathematics and astrology and religion and science tie together with this particular shape? This is Metatron's cube. As you can see, it is a hexagram, just like we have at the North Pole of Saturn. You can see that it can be viewed as a cube at the correct angle. That's why it's called Metatron's cube, a two-dimensional form of a cube. Thus, Saturn, throughout the ages, being called the black cube. So let's start off by talking about Saturn itself. We know that Saturn is in position 6, in according to the source of our solar system being the sun, and Earth is in position of 3. We just recently rid ourselves of Pluto, which comes in at 9. It also has been discovered that Pluto actually does have a magnetic field despite its size, technically making it a planet, but I mean, how many times do we want to go back and forth with that? But that 3, 6, and 9, those numbers are interesting. Anyone who is a fan of Nikola Tesla, the Holy Trinity, or sacred geometry understands that divinity seems to have ties with those 3 numbers in a very deep way. The connection between Saturn and the hexagonal black cube was not taken seriously by our modern age until 1981, when a scientist... Yeah, it's crazy. It makes you wonder.